Hi crochet friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Stefania and today I thought I would do some painting. As you might have seen in the last couple of videos, I'm still recovering from a burn to the back of my right hand. So I'm still stuck not being able to crochet, but a friend suggested that I might try painting with my left hand. I thought this sounded like a really fun challenge, so that's what we're going to be doing today. I've got a 15 by 15 centimeter canvas ready to go and a beautiful reference image of Yosemite Valley. This is a bit of a longer video, so grab something for yourself to craft and let's jump right in. As you can see, I've set up some painting supplies, as well as put some colors on my palette for my background. Since I'm not used to painting with my left hand, I'm going to try to keep it pretty simple, so that's why I only picked 3 brushes here. Usually with my paintings, I also end up using a finer tipped brush, but I won't be adding that many fine details, so hopefully these will be enough. I'll try to remember to include a picture that I'm referencing here. And as you can see, the sky is a really nice, subtle, peachy color, which is why I have the red, orange, yellow, and a bunch of white. Once I get the background and the reflection of the river laid down, I'll wait for that to dry and then come back to add the mountains and tree details afterwards. So without further ado, let's get started on this background. Already feels pretty foreign using my left hand for this. I'm starting with just laying down a layer of white so that I can blend the other colors more easily on the canvas. This is also a nice warm-up to get my left hand used to holding a paintbrush and making these motions. I'm able to leave my right hand unbandaged while I'm at home so that the wound can breathe a bit, but I'll have to be careful not to get any paint in that area. I am using my right hand just to stabilize the canvas on this paper. I've gone ahead and sped up the footage of me painting just so that we aren't here for a super long video. Now that I have a layer of white, I'm gonna go and grab some orange, some red, and a bit of yellow. Try to mix those around. Might have grabbed a bit too much, so I'm gonna also grab some more white paint here. Yeah, that helps tone it down. While you mostly see me working on crochet projects, I still really love painting. During the pandemic, I found some solace in watching Bob Ross videos and decided that I would try out some of his techniques using acrylic paint. I really love Bob Ross's approach to painting, especially how he says that there's no mistakes, only happy accidents. This is a motto that I've taken into my creative life in general, not just in painting. It's really helped me combat my perfectionism and helps me let go of any perceived mistakes that I might have faulted myself for in the past. Now, in Bob Ross's tutorials, he uses kind of a crisscross method to blend his paint, which I'm not that confident in just yet with my left hand. I'm really having to fight the urge to pass the paintbrush over to my right hand. But let's see how we do. Just go in, do some crisscrossing to kind of blend out this edge. Let's see, I wonder if I could take my fan brush, if I can kind of buff out some of these edges. Well, not exactly how I imagined, but it's really interesting noticing how difficult it is to use my left hand for techniques that I'm quite practiced in with my right. You might also notice that I'm making sure to paint the edges of my canvas. This is a practice that I've picked up that really helps finish the painting once it's done. Okay, I think I'm happy with that as our background, so I'm going to give this a couple minutes to dry, and we'll be back to add on the next layer of details. Alright, it might not be perfectly dry, but I think this top part is at least dry enough to start work on the mountains. As you can see, I added some blue, teal, and green to my palette, and I'll continue using the white that I've got. I'm going to use my angled brush for the next step, and I'm actually going to mix the mountain color on the palette rather than on the canvas like I did with the background. So I want mostly dark blue, a bit of teal, and some green. I also want a bit of white in there, so I'm just going to drag some over. I don't mind if the other colors that I mixed with the white get in this mixture, because it's not going to be enough to really impact the color all that much. I'm liking this color, but I want it a bit darker, so let's get some more blue. Okay, I think I'm happy with that color, so I'm going to get the excess off the brush, and then just start kind of carving out where I think the mountains should go. I'm trying not to be too precise since I'm working with my left hand, but I'm going to just generally follow how the reference photo looks. Once I have that outline, I'm going to go ahead and fill it in. I like how that color looks against the peach. It's quite nice. And again, I'm going to make sure to get the edge of the canvas as well. Now for the other side. And we follow that cliff down into the valley. Yeah, that's nice. Go ahead and fill this side in as well. And cover the edge. Now, it doesn't look exactly the way that the reference photo does, but again, I'm just using that as general inspiration rather than trying to create a copy of the landscape. My mountains are a lot more bright blue than the reference as well. The reference photo has more of a foggy effect in these background layers. Now, in order to get the next layer even darker than this, I'm going to mix in the rest of this dark blue. And I think I'll add more of the green as well, in fact. Let's test at the base here to see if that's enough of a difference. Yeah, I'm happy with that contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and just start kind of blotting in these darker trees. Again, I'm not worrying about being too detailed. I just want to get the colors approximated in. Now I'm going to drag this same dark tree color down a little bit to help in the transition into the foreground. I want to make sure that none of that sky color is poking through. I think I'm also going to add just a touch of this Van Dyke brown to darken up the color tone a bit for the next layer. I really love this blue color that I've got going, but I want a little bit more earthy tone in the next layer. The brown will also add a bit of darkness to help us continue in that gradient. Okay, that's a nice color for the next layer, but I'm seeing that I might need to let this layer dry a bit more before I try to add more layers on top. I know I just mixed up my colors, and I don't want them to dry out while I wait for the paint layer to dry, but that's where one of my favorite art hacks comes into play. You might have noticed I'm using just a container lid as my palette, and I take the base of that container and just go ahead and close it. This doesn't keep the paint fresh forever, but it buys me a little bit more time before it starts to dry out. I do want to make sure that my brush doesn't get all dry though, so I'm going to go ahead and clean that off camera, give this a chance to dry, and we'll be back for that next layer. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes since taking that break, which I know isn't enough to make it all completely dry, but I'm feeling a little antsy to keep painting. So I'm going to go ahead and uncover my paint and get back to it. Now with this dark color, I'm carving out the shoreline. And now that I see it on the canvas, I don't think it's quite dark enough. So I'm going to mix in the rest of this brown. And if that's still not dark enough, I'll go ahead and add some black. Okay, let's give that a try. Yeah, I think just with that extra touch of brown helps differentiate it from the background a bit more. Now that I'm adding in the shoreline, I'm realizing that I forgot to add the blue of the water first. Typically how I would have added the water is that once I've carved out the mountain, I should have just carried that same color downwards. Then as I add in the different layers, that same color can kind of add on top of the watercolor as well, creating that multi-blue shades that you see in the reference photo. But luckily I still have a bit of that blue of the mountain left, so I can go ahead and use that for my river. This brush still has a good amount of paint in this darker color, so I'm not going to use it for the river. Instead, I'm going to pull in a fresh brush and just use this one. The white that we laid down in the background layer also dried, so I'm going to go ahead and add some back to help blend these colors into the river. And I actually have a little bit of this peach tone left on the side of my palette, so I'm going to add that in so I can blend these colors a bit better as well. Well, theoretically at least. I don't want it to turn into green, so I'm going to try to be careful not to mix them too much. Or it'll just end up like that, but that's okay. We're painting with our left hand. This is just for fun. But I think that captures the idea of a nice sunset reflection. You can also grab a bit of the darker color to add more contrast in the water. Okay, I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. And now I've taken it a step too far. But I have just a little bit of peach left, so we can work with that. Now I'll go back to my angled brush with this darker paint color and carve out more of this shoreline. Now in the reference, there's some trees in this layer, but I actually like how my landscape is looking the way it is, so I'm not going to add all of these in. But I do like this bush on the side because it helps frame the composition and keep your eye moving around the canvas. So I'll kind of block that one in now. And kind of mirror it on the other side a bit like this. Now there's also a little bit of shoreline in the foreground, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in as well. Finally, there's a couple of rocks in the water, and I want to use the same dark color for those. So I'm just going to grab a blob of paint on the end of my brush and just kind of dot those into the water. Once this layer is dry, I'll go back and add some more colors to help differentiate the layers and make sure you can tell that these are rocks. But by using the same dark greenish blue color, they'll help kind of create a base layer so that the colors meld better together. I mean, I do wish that there was a bit more peach in this center rather than the blue, but like I said, I'm just having fun painting with my left hand and seeing what I can achieve. I do know that I need to let these background layers dry a bit more before I can add details on top of them. So I'm going to give this a chance to dry completely overnight, and I'll come back tomorrow to add the next level of details. I'm back for another day of painting. I'm really happy with how this painting has turned out so far and how it dried down nicely. Looking back at the reference photo, I think I want to add some of the cloudy fogginess into the background layer, add another layer on top of these midground trees, and add some finer details to the foreground. So let's get started with that. I'll uncover my palette from the day before, and for the fogginess, I'm going to take a little bit of white on the side of my palette and dip my brush into my water to kind of water it down a bit. Hopefully that'll keep the white paint from being too opaque and covering up all these nice details. So now that I have some of the watery white on my brush, I'm going to try to just lightly put some around where I want the fog to go. It's okay that I'm covering where my trees are blocked in, because I'm going to go back and add more layers of detail to them. Already adding this little bit of fog is really helping push those mountains back further into the image. Okay, I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. Now I'm going to pick up some of this green and some teal, as well as a little bit of that darker color that we mixed yesterday. And with that color, I'm just going to go on top of where I have those trees blocked in. I want to add a little bit of the darker color. And you can see how I'm really just building those trees back into the composition. Now with the same green that I have on my brush, I want to add some kind of grassy details to this foreground. I'm just scraping the paint down towards the tip of my brush, and then just blotting in some shapes. I'm just adding some extra shades of green to this midground to help give the impression of some other plant details. I have to keep reminding myself that I'm going for more of an impressionist style of landscape rather than a realism one. I'm going to let that dry for a moment because I want to add in some more of the fogginess effect towards the base of these trees. But I can't do that while the trees are still wet, otherwise it'll just all blend together. Okay, I think that's dry enough, so let's go and add some more clouds. Alrighty, once again, we're gonna let that dry for a couple of minutes before we keep painting. Okay, that should be long enough for the fog to dry, so let's go back to adding some more plant details. Yesterday when I was painting the trees, I mentioned that I didn't want to add the bushes in this midground because they were gonna blend in too much. But now that I have this fog layer, I think I am gonna go and add some bushes to help differentiate these different layers of the background. I do want these bushes to be a little bit lighter than the layer before them, so I'm going to add a bit more of the teal to the mix. That's looking a little blue for my taste, so I'm going to actually add some more green paint to my palette. I'm trying to make these bushes a bit of a different shape than how I did the trees, just to further make sure we know that they're different plants. Still looking a little touch blue for my liking, so I'm actually going to add a little bit of yellow to my mix as well. Yeah, I'm liking how that's looking. I'm going to add some more of this lighter green color to our foreground to help balance. The next detail I want to work on is this beachy part. In the reference image, it is quite dark, but there are bits of lighter green going on. Now I'm going to mix some red and green together to create a rich brown color for our shoreline and rock details. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. I think the final thing I want to do is add some finishing details, like a bit of white to do reflections in the water. And I also want to add a couple final details in this foreground area. Okay, I think I am done with this painting. It was an interesting challenge trying to paint with just my left hand, because I kept wanting to just pass the paintbrush over to my right. Since I'm right-hand dominant, I'm also not as practiced with the finer movements with my left hand. I'm having to remind myself that this was just for fun, and I didn't need this to end up looking exactly like the reference photo. If I had been painting it with my right hand, I would have spent a lot more time going in and trying to perfect the details. But honestly, I really am impressed with how this turned out. even if it's not the best landscape painting I've ever done. But I guess I would be concerned if it had been the best painting, since I've been just painting with my right hand up to this point. When I look at the finished painting up close, it's kind of difficult to appreciate its beauty because I'm really zoned in on all the little details that I would have done differently if I had been using my right hand. But if I look at it from a distance, so through the camera, I'm really thrilled with how it turned out. I think that I did a really good job capturing the silhouette of the mountain range, and I really appreciate the little rock details kind of bringing some of that darkness into the water. Even if you don't consider yourself a painter, I highly recommend just grabbing a canvas, some paint, and giving it a go. Following the philosophy of Bob Ross, you can create whatever landscape your mind can dream of and create your own happy little world. Thanks for watching till the end of the video. If you liked this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. I make new videos every week, including check-in videos, crochet tutorials, and other craft content. I really loved doing this challenge, especially because it allowed me to use some creativity while I'm still recovering from my burn. During the healing process, I've been a little bit down not being able to create things, so it's nice to get back into that creative flow. If you have any ideas for other art challenges you'd like to see me attempt, leave those suggestions in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!